So I'll facilitate questions.
I'm wondering, when you showed the clip of the doctor curing the patient, it looked to me like the doctor had a uniform on. Is it significant that he's an Army doctor? I mean, what does that say about the institution of the military?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and allows me to say just a teeny bit more about the film, which is that the entire narrative takes place in the context of the military. The film was released in '49, which is 1 year after the gesture to integrate the armed forces, and really is very clearly a piece of pro-military integrationist propaganda. The treatment for the patient takes place in a military base somewhere in the South Pacific, whereas the mission that we see in flashbacks occurred on an island just, south, west, east of the base. So the doctor is certainly a representative of the military. By that, he is also a representative of the United States. Everybody seems to play a clearly sort of representative role in this film, Moss included, obviously, which is, again, why it's both so problematic and so telling that the cure is to treat him as an individual, and yet the stakes and the terminology are drawn from a lexicon of representation.
I learned a lot, and I thought that I enjoyed the paper. I'm trying to formulate this question, and I'm not sure if I have it, because it seems to me that there is a long tradition of, certainly African American poetry, of the black character serving as a kind of scapegoat, right, the one who dies for the sins of others. So I'm trying to come to terms with the way that this is set up, that it's actually the white character who dies for the sins of the nation. And I'm just trying to figure out, does the black character act in any way as a scapegoat, or is this a revision or stepping away from that trope?
Wow, that's a great question. It makes me think of a number of different answers or responses, I guess, at once. I'm not sure if I have a complete answer. I am thinking of Dunbar's poem, early poem about colored soldiers, where they die for presumably the hope of civic integration and full rights. And that is certainly the legacy out of which these attempts to recuperate or reconstruct the figure of the black soldier comes. So that's definitely the right terrain to be thinking in. And so, as you point out, it's remarkable that it is the white soldier who dies. The white soldier, I mean, the question really is, within the logic of the film, is the white soldier a character in his own right, or is he a component of the black soldier, which is really what I'm arguing. If so, then again, what a remarkable film, instrumentalizing a white soldier. However, I've chosen this film because it is remarkable. It's the beginning of a cycle of what Thomas Cripps has called the Hollywood message movie, in which themes and problems of race and integration are paramount and are addressed in Hollywood in a totally unprecedented manner. One that I think, we could talk about this forever, but that has a lot to do with Cold War politics and the need for a new discourse around race to emerge and circulate in the United States. So I think that the most productive way for me to think about what you've asked is to say that the white soldier dies in order to both allow this film to craft as heroic the black soldier, but also his death allows, I think, both productively and subversively the specter of lynching to hover around the margins of the film without being represented there. So racial violence never has to be represented in this film, and yet it's present all the time.
This very much follows on Cheryl's question, and I wanted to, if you had any thoughts on the line, since Cheryl asked you about poetry and the ways in which, just the line, right, my wife likes poetry, you want to hear some poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how does the movie deal with sort of art and the role of art in, that line itself, right, seems to suggest that art has some sort of like a something or healing quality in and of itself, but also associates it with the feminine, my wife, right? So, are there other, I haven't seen this movie, but are there other parts of the movie that deal with sort of what we do with literature or poetry?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to resist my urge to tell you the story of the wife's role in this film, because she appears and disappears briefly just to sort of set up a not entirely homosocial space. But the poem gets read, in fact, in the film. It becomes a motif that gets repeated at the end of the film when Moss goes off with that same soldier Mingo, and they decide to open the first interracial bar ever together somewhere where they'll probably encounter a lot of difficulties. I think that you're right to suggest that the poem's role both in the narrative of the film and then even beyond the narrative is as catharsis, and that it points to the film's project as well of offering audiences, black audiences and white audiences, an opportunity to acknowledge a limited amount of racism that's been in the past in American society and that has now been cleared away so that integration can proceed. And there are actually some descriptions of, in the papers of the time, of viewers, white audiences, seeing the film and crying with, the writer describes it as relief. So the film perhaps sees itself as playing a role of catharsis and foregrounds art, as you point out, really effectively as cathartic even within the diegesis itself. Thank you.
Yeah. Kind of follow up on that, going back to that same scene, I think this is more of a comment, kind of get your feedback on it. Found it very interesting that his fellow colleague, the soldier, when he was listening to the man being tortured, Powell being tortured, he was saying, well, you're from Pittsburgh, you're from the city. So you hear these screams all the time, and what it signified to me was this way of linking the urban space as, again, in some ways, kind of similar to the jungle warfare that they're out into, and that the fact that he said, well, you should be used to this because you're from the city, and linking that to these screams says a lot about what the city signified, even during this period, in contrast to the suburbs or the country, because it's interesting that they would make this character be from the city, not from the rural South, not from a, say, black suburban community or something like that, but from the city, which to me says a lot about race and urbanity and such.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that comment as well. I was thinking about it last night, actually. It's funny that you mention it because I went back to the play from which this was adapted to see, is it there to describe the Jew? And believe it or not, they say the same thing about the Jew. I'm calling him the Jew because his name's Coney in the play. But yet, what's so weird is there are a couple flashbacks of Moss's childhood or late adolescence with Finch, whom he knew in high school, and they're not in a city at all. So there's like a real continuity issue in terms of that comment. I was shocked to find it in the play. I was sure that it had been added to the film just because of what you speak of, I guess. So then what I can say it points to is another claim that I sort of only slightly make in the paper, which is that the stereotype of the racialized hysteric probably indeed has a lot to do with immigration and migration to urban spaces, if it was used, you know, for Jews as well.